Buenas tardes. Por favor, apagamos los celulares o lo ponemos en silencio. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I have the pleasure to welcome you to this conference on behalf of the Center of Energy and Natural Resources at ITAM. Today, Engineer Carlos de Regules, Director of National Agency for Industrial Safety and Environment Protection of Hydrocarbon Sector, will be acting as the moderator of the panel. I now invite Engineer Carlos de Regules to initiate the panel discussion. Thank you.
Okay, so yes, hello, welcome everybody, and thank you for being here. And thanks for ITAM for doing this. This is a very timely conversation in terms of the policy decisions ahead concerning not only energy, but also the environment and the link between them, climate change. So again, thank you for this wonderful event. And let me just walk you through what's going to happen today. We're going to have a panel where, first of all, Dr. Alejandro Hernandez, Vice Rector from ITAM, will be addressing some words. After that, Undersecretary Leonardo Beltran will be framing the question in terms of what the energy outlook looks like for the next coming years. And finally, Dr. Fatih Birol, did I pronounce it correctly? I hope so. Okay. Dr. Fatih Birol will be addressing us with the major issues and the major challenges that the International Energy Agency is envisioning in terms of climate change and energy. After that, we will have some time for questions and answers. You were giving some little pieces of paper at the entrance, so please, as the conversation moves forward, start preparing your questions and be sure to handle them in a timely fashion to our organizers. So having said that, thank you for being here again, and Dr. Alejandro Hernandez, the mic is yours.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to ITAM. It's a great pleasure to have you here with us this afternoon. I want to first say hello to all the members in the panel and some special guests. Mr. Ambassador, it's an honor having you with us. We are indeed very grateful to the International Energy Agency and to the Ministry of Energy in Mexico for choosing ITAM this afternoon to present some of the results from the World Energy Outlook, especially in what has to do with the environment. Indeed, it's a great honor that you have bestowed on us, so I'm very, very grateful. I would like just to, besides giving this very brief introduction, just saying a few words, if I may, about why this is so important for us as a university. We are launching with just this semester formally, this academic year that just started for us, our brand new Center for Energy and Natural Resources. This is a new center, but it's not a new idea. It's been going on for a few years, a lot of it under the leadership of Professor Josefina Cortez, who's been pushing ideas on energy at this institution forever. She used to have an old center that was called Energía en Red, and we just borrowed that idea and decided to launch something which is very ambitious, which is an interdisciplinary, it will be the first interdisciplinary center, research center at ITAM. It kind of disturbs a little bit our structure of how we are organized in terms of departments and disciplines, and this is something different that's going to go across the board, parallel to everything else. Let's see if it works. The idea is that this center will gather already all the research that is being produced in energy and natural resources to the extent that it's connected to energy. There's a lot that's been done, and the idea, of course, is as having a center, especially if we are capable of getting in some resources for the center, hopefully it will also foster additional research on these areas and give good ideas to our scholars to start thinking about these very, very relevant topics. So when you think of what are ITAM's strengths, well, I mean, we've been working a lot on regulation, on legal aspects of the new energy market design, whether it's auctions, rules, everything, procurement, anything, any specific rules of that would define what the market of energy for energy is. There's issues on finance, there's issues on technology, there's issues on politics, there's anything you want to think about, it's related to this enormously important sector that's for us in Mexico, energy. So I'm very happy. This is just one of the many events that I think our center is going to be sponsoring. And so all I can say is, well, Josefina, Juan Carlos, good luck. We are very lucky to have Juan Carlos Velasquez with us as well as part of this very important initiative. So I'm sure actually that the center is going to do terrific. Because it's going to be, I should stress, even though the center has many lines of action, including training, of course, we're putting research at the core of this center. This is a center where we expect to have great ideas being produced. It's also a center that's going to allow us to be in touch with other important research centers around the world doing energy, in the UK, in the US, in Europe, everywhere in the world. And let's see what happens. So hopefully you will be hearing a lot about our Centro ITAM de Energía y Recursos Naturales. So thank you very much. And with that, I would just say, Dr. Fatih Birol, it's a pleasure and a great honor having you with us. And let's get started. And thank you.
Okay, so thank you, Alejandro. And Undersecretary Beltran, if you want to address us with some words, please.
Absolutely. Thanks very much, Carlos. And for me, it's a real pleasure to be here. This is my alma mater. I spent here 5 years, and very exciting and an amazing time here. And I would like to congratulate Dr. Alejandro Hernandez, of course, the president of ITAM, and all the people that are taking part in the development of the center. This is such a great initiative. As you know, Mexico last year undertook a series of reforms, and in particular in the energy sector, as the bylaws of the constitutional reform were enacted, President Peña instructed the development of a strategic program for human development in the energy sector. And this strategic program for or talent development in the energy sector was an instruction to the cabinet in which public education, energy, and foreign affairs, along with the state productive enterprises, should be joined together in promoting and developing the talent that would be required because of the energy reform. So this is an initiative that it's building upon this new framework, and it's an initiative that we applaud. With this first conference, we have the privilege here of having Dr. Fatih Birol, who is the head of the International Energy Agency. And with the inaugural conference of this energy center at ITAM, we, as a representative of Secretariat of Energy, we are very happy and delighted to support and endorse the initiative. We welcome all the projects, and we welcome all the students that would like to build upon your knowledge in the energy sector, and that the funding that has been set forth in this particular program is devoted to build and train the next energy leaders in the energy sector for Mexico, and of course to build and strengthen the infrastructure and the capacity to build the bridge between capacity development, but also research and development to make sure that we have a competitive energy sector. So with that, I would really like to thank, on behalf of the Secretary of Energy, Mr. Pedro Joaquin Caldwell, to thank Fatih Birol, to welcome to Mexico, and for the privilege of hosting here in my alma mater this inaugural conference. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Leonardo. So having said this, let's welcome Dr. Fatih Birol in this address. And again, please be sure to write down your very knowledgeable questions and hand them in time so they can be addressed. Thank you very much. Dr. Fatih Birol, the floor is yours.
So, dear professors, distinguished guests, Mr. Ambassador, dear colleagues, a very good afternoon to all of you. It's a great privilege to come to this very prestigious University of ITAM. I heard a lot before coming here about ITAM, and when I read from the reports provided to me, I was very, very impressed. So, before starting my presentation, I have a suggestion to Professor Hernandez, if I may say so. As you know, International Energy Agency, or I hope you know, we work on energy. We are the global energy authority. We work with many universities, and such presentations, in some cases, are becoming traditional for us. There are some universities throughout the world with which I should say, we have such relationship, making presentations all the time, getting feedback, and getting also students for making a stage, spending some time with us. For example, since we have the UK ambassador here, with the Imperial College in the UK, we have such an agreement. Or with the Tsinghua University in China, in Beijing, we have such an agreement, with MIT and others. So, Professor Hernandez, a suggestion to you, me or my colleagues, on a yearly basis, we will be very pleased to come here and to tell us how do we see the world, the climate change, the energy picture, and get your questions and talk with your students, and perhaps why not some of them coming to IE and make a stage and learning from the experts and experts learning from them, working together, and it could be an excellent dialogue between IEA in Paris and also ITAM. Now, as Mr. Undersecretary mentioned, this is the climate change is a critical issue, and we have a very important meeting, ladies and gentlemen, in Paris, only in 2.5 months of time. In television, when you look at the television, you see many international meetings on a peace process in some issue, on science, another issue. There are many meetings, and they are all important. World leaders are attending, reporters are giving us the news and the background and the lobbying. But in my humble view, the meeting in Paris is a unique one which will have impact on every single person in this planet. You can be a student here in ITAM, or you can be a businessman in Beijing or in Shanghai. You can be living in Russia, or you can be living in South Africa. It will affect everybody. You can be a businessman, or you can be a poor person. You can be a rich person. It does not distinguish the impact of climate and the climate change. Therefore, if we have an agreement in Paris, whether it will be a successful agreement or not, is very important and very critical for many years to come. We had, in 2009, in Copenhagen, a climate meeting like this, and unfortunately, I should say, we didn't come up with an agreement which could provide a signal to the energy sector. And again, in my view, and in the numbers that I'm going to show you, we cannot afford in Paris another Copenhagen. Otherwise, we will have to pay, all of us have to pay significant amount of cost, money, time, and many other things. And it will be definitely a very bad news for all of us. It is the very reason why the many, many world leaders are working together to come up with an agreement in Paris to send the right signals. So when we look at the current picture, we have, as I said, beginning of December, we have the COP meeting. On one hand, the governments, on the other hand, the business, the NGOs, research community, they are all working together to find a solution. And the good news is, momentum is building. Now, we had two historical announcements from US and China. One in November last year in Beijing. President Obama and President Xi said that we are going to tackle this issue. And China, for the first time, set a target. Excellent news, a historical news. And then, last week in Washington, once again, President Obama and President Xi agreed what are the steps, concrete steps and concrete measures that China and US are going to take to reach those targets what they announced in Beijing. And among those steps, there is one, or at least two, very, very important. One, China is going to build a cap and trade system. What is this cap and trade system? It means every country, every state in China, every business in China, they have a limit of emitting carbon dioxide emissions. If they do more than that, they have to pay. If they emit less than that, they will get money. So providing some market incentives in China, as it is the case in Europe now. Second, China, until recently, was asking, I am a developing country, if you want me to go to renewable energies or clean energies, I want financing support from you. And now China is saying that I am going to give you support, developing countries, if you go for low carbon investments. This is extremely important. Why I mention US and China so boldly? Because these are the two largest emitters. If you put two of them together, you have already 40–45% of the global emissions. But when you look at the political momentum, you will see that Europe has been the champion of fighting against climate change since many, many years in a very consistent way. We have to put it aside. So Europe, US, China, big emitters are building the momentum. Now, another point, as I will tell you in a minute, in the past, Copenhagen discussions, or before Kyoto, some of you may remember, many countries were pushing the button of fighting against climate change, but it was mainly developed countries. Now we are seeing now developing countries are also taking steps and making commitments. Another good news, in my view, is the companies, energy companies, are starting to engage with the climate change. Until recently, many energy companies were thinking, this is climate change discussion, but I do my business and they do their talk. It was the main mentality. But now, I believe if there is any energy company in the world, any, oil, gas, renewables, coal, whatever, if they think that the climate change discussions, climate change policies will not affect their business strategy, they are making a grave mistake. It will affect everybody at different levels, but all the energy business will be affected, and some of them are clever enough, they are trying to position themselves rightly in the energy business. Now, why we as the IEA are talking about climate change? We are an energy organization. Very simple. 2/3 of the emissions causing climate change come from the energy sector. 2/3. And all other sectors, their role or their sin, whatever you call it, is about 1/3. If we put all of them together, 1/3, energy sector alone 2/3. So therefore, without solving the problem in the energy sector, we have no chance whatsoever solving the climate problem. And therefore, as IEA, we believe it is our responsibility to guide the global energy sector, energy industry, in the right direction, in the direction of sustainable energy development. And it is the very reason we are making suggestions, analysis, and provide guidance to the markets. Now, of course, we are well aware that cutting the emissions is not the only task what the energy sector has to deal with. There are other issues. For example, energy access. Today, ladies and gentlemen, 1.2 billion people, 20% of the global population, the world population, they have no electricity. Mainly in Africa, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. This is another issue. This is another global issue that we have to take into consideration. Therefore, we try to provide a holistic approach, climate change, energy access, energy security for the countries and beyond. Since I talk about the good news, let me give one rather fresh good news to you. In the last 40 years that we have the data, global carbon dioxide emissions, this is the most powerful greenhouse gas, global emissions increased every year except we had a recession. Every single year increased. Only last year, 2014, we have seen for the first time in the last 4 decades that the emissions did not increase, they stayed the same, although global economy increased more than 3%. So economy increased, grew, but the emissions stayed the same for the first time. In the past, emissions did not increase twice, but both of the times we had a financial crisis, economic downturn. Why? What happened? 2 things, 2 important things. One, for the first time in China, we have seen coal consumption declined. It never happened before. It increased every year in serious terms. Second, we have seen renewable energies, especially in the electricity generation, hydropower, wind, and solar, taking a greater share in the new built power plants throughout the world. So therefore, this was a very good and encouraging news on top of the political momentum coming from, as I told you, US, China, Europe, and other countries. Of course, these are good news, but there are difficulties as well. Now, difficulty is the following. Why we are not sure that there is an agreement in Paris? Why? Unlike in the past, almost everybody in the world now believe that the climate change is a major problem for all of us, everybody. I said almost everybody, I should say. There are some people who think otherwise, but the 99% and all the big body of scientists in the world consider climate change as one of the major problems that the humanity is facing in its history. So since everybody thinks the same, we have to find a solution. Why we cannot find a solution, or why we cannot be sure 100% in Paris we have an agreement? Why? The answer is very simple. Countries say, let's find a solution, but your responsibility is more than my responsibility. The other says, your responsibility is more than my responsibility. It is a definition of the burden. Who made up this problem? Therefore, who should clean it up? The identification of the responsibilities and identification of the further homework, who should do what. And countries have different views. Some countries say, don't look at the current emissions. Look at the emissions, what happened in the last 120 years, because as there are many scientists here who know much better than me, the climate change is not only the emissions going up today, it is the accumulation of the emissions which went to the atmosphere since 120 years. It is already there 100 years ago, which went to the atmosphere. And to be very fair, which we are in our work at the IEA, United States, European countries, during their industrial revolution, they use a lot of coal and put a lot of carbon in the atmosphere. It is still there. And they have a significant responsibility. If you look at the past 110 years, you see it here. But when you look at the future, in the next 20 to 25 years, this time, the responsibilities coming from the emerging countries are growing substantially. For example, China, even on a per capita basis, going to take over Europe very soon. So therefore, the difficulty is to identify whose fault is it, whose mistake is it, in order to find out who should do what in the future. And therefore, there are many, many proposals here that we are, like the others, working on to come up with some pragmatic solutions. But one thing is clear. Everybody has to move. An agreement which wouldn't have the signature of everybody or almost everybody will definitely fail in that context. And here we see that many, many countries now are putting their pledges with the United Nations. What does pledge mean? Pledge means countries say, until 2030, I am going to reduce my emissions this much. They are committing themselves. It's called pledge, or in other words, some people call it INDCs. There are different names, but the idea is every country is providing some targets how much they are going to emit the CO2 emissions. And today, as of today, almost 70% of the existing emissions are under pledge by the countries. Many, many countries are putting their pledges, commitments, and they have submitted this to United Nations. Now, this is extremely important. In addition to, as I said, developed countries such as US, Japan, European countries, emerging countries are moving very strongly. And my point here is that we all need to applaud Mexico as being the first country, first emerging country to make a pledge. Today, many other countries did follow Mexico, but it is very important that Mexico was the first emerging countries which set an excellent example for many emerging countries. So these pledges, these commitments, these targets, we look, what does it mean for the energy sector? Because I told you that the 2/3 of the emissions causing climate change come from the energy sector. If you make a commitment to cut the emissions this much or that much each country, it will affect the energy sector. It will change the energy sector. I can tell you that not all these pledges are very, very ambitious, or as ambitious as one would like to see, but they do change the energy sector significantly. Couple of things that we found out. One, about 1/4 of the total energy in 2030 will come from clean energy sector, and the energy efficiency will improve 3 times faster than it did in the last few years. It gives a big boost to energy efficiency, and energy efficiency is the biggest winner from all these climate change discussions. Renewables. On the electricity sector, 60% of all new power plants built in the next 15 years will be renewable energy. This is amazing. So 40% gas plus coal plus oil plus nuclear put together, and 60% alone renewable energies. It's a big boom, ladies and gentlemen. And you may well think that this will happen in the Europe, US. Wrong. The biggest center of the growth of renewable energy is China. And I can tell you, last year, 2014, renewable energy investments in China was bigger than United States plus all 29 European countries put together. Much bigger than all of these countries put together in China, mainly solar, wind, and hydropower. India making a big push for solar power. Of course, Europe and US following the same trend. In terms of fossil fuels, coal, oil, and gas, gas is the only one which increases its share in the global energy mix in a world where the countries are following their climate commitments they make to United Nations. Coal, as I said, is having the biggest hit. We see in China, in US, Europe, it is going to slow down substantially. In most cases, replaced by natural gas, in others by renewable energies. Now, when we say our climate goal, what is our climate goal? Climate goal is that everybody can have one climate goal. There is one universally agreed target, which is the following. Global temperature, on average, should not increase more than 2 degrees Celsius. Okay, more than 2 degrees Celsius. So why? Because scientists tell us that this is the limit that we can have a life more or less similar to what we have now. If it is more than 2 degrees target, then we are in trouble. Much more extreme weather events, typhoons, cyclones, droughts, immigration as a result of climate change. But if we stay under 2 degrees, we can still adapt to that life. When we look at those pledges, what the countries say they will do, they do not bring us directly to this target. But what they do is they provide the much needed momentum, especially in the energy sector, where the world needs to go in terms of stimulating renewable energies and energy efficiency investments. Now, a few words on Mexico. I mentioned to you that Mexico was the leader in terms of the emerging countries, and according to our analysis, Mexico's pledge means in 15 years of time, the emissions of Mexico will remain more or less what it is today, mainly as a result of the efficiency and low carbon push coming from Mexico, which means about 25% lower than business as usual trends of Mexico. If Mexico can reach that, and I am sure Mexico will reach it, it will be definitely a big success story. And when we look at our analysis, we see that the share of renewables will grow substantially. Today about 13–14%, and it will be about 1/3, about 33–34% in the year 2030. And it is mainly, the driver will be, in our analysis, it will be mainly wind. And another good news, I believe good news, is on the oil side. The share of oil will decline 10 percentage points, despite the increase of the car ownership. Why? Because of the recently set fuel efficiency standards. Vehicles, cars, light trucks, they will be more efficient, and we believe around 2030 they can come close to the level of European levels of today, which are very, very efficient. But this is also good for the Mexican economy, because if Mexico uses less oil at home, can export more oil and get much more cash. And I firmly believe that the ongoing opening up of the Mexican hydrocarbon sector will give a strong boost to the increase of Mexican oil production in the next years to come. This, combined with the lower consumption prospects, will increase the revenues, the cash of selling oil, and it will increase directly the wealth of Mexican citizens in the street today. But these INDCs, or pledges, targets, whatever you call them, will not happen just as you show in this nice slides, nice colors, nice pictures. You need, first of all, investments for that. You have the right investment incentives to attract investments in the power sector and in the energy efficiency. And I know I have been discussing this today with Secretary Caldwell and other undersecretaries and the colleagues who are working on the electricity sector. They are taking the necessary steps in order to stimulate clean energy investments. Now, another thing, why, as we see it from Paris, why Mexico needs to be applauded, not only put this a first emerging country, but to put it in the law and giving a very important legal character to this very ambition. Now, dear colleagues, to give you time for question and answers, which I would definitely enjoy. Of course, depending on your questions, I will enjoy or not, but most likely I will enjoy. I would like to tell you what we as the International Energy Agency expect from COP? In concrete terms, we are discussing this with the colleagues who are in charge of negotiations, with the Chinese negotiators, US negotiators, the French, European, and so on. We want 4 things in order to see that a right signal goes to energy sector. Why it is important? Because if the COP Paris says, you investor, energy businessman, take climate seriously. If you don't take it seriously, you may make investments that may be a loss maker for you. Or you investor, I am giving you the signal that clean energy investment, that efficiency investment may well be a lucrative one, so look at the opportunity there. This signal needs to come from Paris. And to do that, we set 4 suggestions, 4 items in the COP21. The first one is the global emissions. As I showed you a minute ago, they are increasing every year except for 2014. We think global emissions need to peak around 2020 and they need to come down. If they peak much later, 2030 and so, we may well say goodbye to our 2 degrees target. So therefore, an early peak is very important. What does peak means? It comes to a summit and it starts to decline. Emissions need to decline, global emissions around 2020, and the measures to do that need to be made in Paris. Second, now, every country have these pledges now. This is very good. Most of the countries said, we are going to do this by 2030. But, ladies and gentlemen, the conditions of 2015 may be different in 5 years of time, 2020, for example. 5 years ago, cost of solar energy, cost of wind was much more expensive than today. And if they become much cheaper in 5 years of time, perhaps countries may have well more ambitious targets. Or we may well see that in the next 5 years, the climate change becomes so serious that we all think, oh my God, we have to take much drastic measures. So therefore, our second suggestion is these INDCs, these commitments, need to be revised every 5 years. Third, now, these current pledges, commitments are up to 2030. But we need a bit of a longer time horizon saying that the world believes, Paris says, the world believes that the global emissions in 2050 should be this % lower than today. Why do we need this? We need this to give a push for the technologies which are not today commercial, which cannot be commercial until 2030, but may well be commercial later on. It can be the energy storage, it can be the electric cars, it can be anything. So there's a need for a longer-term vision for 2050 or beyond. And fourth, this is a job, homework we ask ourselves as the IEA. Somebody in the world should check. Government said, I will do this up to 2030, emit that much emission, reduce this much emission, but somebody has to check each year whether or not they're on the right track. Who would believe they are going the right track or not? We shouldn't look at 15 years later. So there is a need to track these changes. We trust all the governments, at least most of them, but we want to see, to make sure that they are on the right track and say at the end of the year, my friend, you said this, but you are doing that. There's a difference there. So there is a need for tracking this, the transition, tracking that very development in the energy sector, what the countries are doing. And as IEA, we are going to ask for this mandate in COP meeting, and we have been already talking with many governments and many participants. So, ladies and gentlemen, let me finish my presentation, and then we will be very happy to have a discussion by telling you that, one, Paris is an extremely critical meeting. Do not underestimate the importance of the meeting for yourself, for your family, for your country, for your business, for your future, for your career, for anything. Second, energy is at the heart of it. If we don't get the right signals for the energy sector, we will continue to make the investments which will lock in our future in the primitive technologies, and we will have to live with them for many, many years to come. And as IEA, we are working very hard on this issue. We have a November 17-18, only 2 weeks before the COP meeting, we have our ministerial meeting. All the energy ministers in the world are coming. It is going to be chaired by the US Secretary of Energy, and I am very happy that this morning the Minister Caldwell agreed to come to our ministerial meeting and agreed to give one of the keynote speeches in our meeting. And in this meeting, ladies and gentlemen, something is happening for the first time. I am since 20 years with the IEA, 20 years, almost a half of a lifetime. I have seen many ministerial meetings. Every 2 years we do it. For the first time, climate change is the opening topic of our ministerial agenda. We will start with climate change and then go to other subjects. It is another indication how we believe that the energy is at the heart of the debate, how we believe that the energy sector, international organizations like the IEA, the academic community, businesses, and the governments need to work hand in hand in order to avoid a catastrophic outcome for our planet. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Just 1 minute. Okay, so thank you very much, Dr. Birol, for this wonderful presentation, very insightful. And let me first start probably with, I know you asked for 3 questions. Let me ask 2 questions first, and then that will give you the time to go through the rest of the questions. First one is, we saw a year 2014 with a stallment of emissions. That is good news. You also referred to China emissions as a good news as well. But how can we be sure that these good news are the result of actual policies being put in place and not of, for example, changes in the prices of natural gas versus other fuels, or actual economic slowdown in some regions of the world? So that's the first question. How can we be sure this is the effect of policies being put in place? And then second is, those policies, those INDCs or those pledges by countries have been made in the context of certain market conditions. But those market conditions will change, prices will change, and demand will change. How can we make sure that those INDCs are valid or probably are revised through time in order for them to stay valid?
And thank you very much for both of these very good questions. So in 2014, we have seen, as I mentioned, the emissions stay same level of 2013, and for the first time, in the absence of an economic recession, they didn't increase. Why? Now, of course, as the colleague who asked the question, there may be reasons related to economy in some countries. There may be a reason, even some countries, meteorological reasons. But I believe there are two policies which played a critical role here. One is in China, they put a cap on the coal consumption. And this is not mainly driven to find a solution to climate change. This is mainly driven to find a solution to the local pollution in the cities, because it is a serious issue for the Chinese population. And I can tell you one number, since Mexico is dealing with the oil issues, and many colleagues here, we have read many companies, oil companies, majors, others, are firing people because of the low oil prices. 4,000 here, 5,000 here, 9,000 here, one companies. In China, second largest coal company last week fired more than 100,000 people. It's a signal. So one major policy is, I think, China coal policy. The second is the renewable support policies in Europe, in the United States, and in other countries. These are the two major policies, among others, policies that helped to 2014 to stay where it is. Of course, there may be other reasons, and it is no guarantee that the next years will be also stable, the emissions, and it is the very reason I believe there is a signal need to come from Paris and to put it in a policy framework rather than the individual country efforts. Now, the pledges are made as of 2014 or 15, and they are submitted this year. Of course, the markets will change, countries' economic growth can be affected, or any other thing can happen. And it is the very reason we believe pledges need to be revised every 5 years. But I hope that revision will bring more ambition rather than less ambition. I believe there will be a growing pressure, international pressure on the countries who would like to not to do their homework. It will be a similar thing what the countries are escaping from an responsibility that they have to do internationally. If the country wants to be a respected member of the international community, they will have to obey their pledge, and countries like European countries, like China, like others, making more than that, I am sure they will gain more respect. So therefore, there is, of course, no guarantee that countries will continue with their pledges, but there will be growing international pressure on those who do not do their homeworks.
Thank you very much. And I'm trying to do my homework here and trying to organize questions around topics. And of course, you can be sure that Dr. Birol will receive all of the questions, even if he doesn't have the time now to answer all of them. So the next question is, do you foresee a new global carbon credit market out of COP21? And probably along with that is, do you foresee a global price for carbon as a feasible thing? Next one is, which countries will follow Mexico's leadership in climate change according to your vision? And probably speaking about Latin America, since South America, since few countries have actually delivered pledges. And the next one is, what policy instruments would you recommend should be used to promote low carbon energy in Mexico?
Thank you. First of all, let me tell you what you said in the beginning. If we are not able to answer all the questions now, because of time, we will take all of them, and if the email addresses are there, we will get all the colleagues with the answers. This is secured. Now, do I expect a global carbon price coming from Paris? So I will come to Mexico, hopefully, more often when the Mr. Undersecretary and Mr. Secretary invite me. You will perhaps know me better, and I say what I believe. So this is, I am not a very good diplomat here. I think I don't. I wish it could come, because carbon price is the best tool to reduce the CO2 emissions in the most efficient way. Okay, and I am sure there are many economists here, since ITAM is famous for the one of the best educations in economy. Carbon price is the best. But looking at the realities of life, as somebody who makes his hands dirty with data and the policies, I believe where we are today, it is too much expected from Paris to have an international carbon price. But Europe, now China, California, some places we see cap and trade carbon price. This is very good, but to expect one carbon price globally will be on the very optimistic side. Where do the pledges come from? They come from overall the world, to be honest with you. I cannot say this region is more than the other, but we should be fair. Europe is the one who has been pushing this agenda since a long time, very strongly, followed by US with the Obama administration, China, and Mexico, as I said, the very first country in the emerging countries group, making a very strong push, and other Latin American countries, and Africa, many countries in Africa. And you know what? Africa today, that's a very interesting point. When you look at the global emissions in the last 120 years, Africa's sin or responsibility of the global emissions is less than 3%. But the continent which would suffer the most will be Africa under climate change. If there's a climate change, it will hit Africa the most. Yes, you have no responsibility, but you will get the biggest burden, biggest consequence of the climate change as Africa. Very important to note. And it is not in your hands, your destiny. Others will decide your destiny, the big emitters, whether or not you will face natural disasters, droughts, and the others in your continent. Think about the tragedy in a country where 2 out of 3 people have no access to electricity, have no electricity. So therefore, pledges come from everywhere, and we are definitely very happy to see so many countries coming together. What policies for, in terms of climate change for Mexico? I think there are many of them, but 3 of them are important to highlight for me. One, further push for wind. Second, further push for efficiency throughout the sector. And of course, having the pipes coming, bringing the natural gas through the country would be also helpful to have a good marriage between the renewable energies and natural gas in terms of the electricity systems. Because the renewables, wind is very good, no carbon impact, no environmental impact, but it is a variable energy source. If there is wind, you have electricity. If there is no wind, you don't have electricity. So therefore, to combine it with natural gas provides security, and I think this very government's position to bring the cheap North American gas to Mexico is the third one I would suggest, in addition to wind and efficiency.
Thank you again. And here's a very, very interesting question. And let me
They are all interesting, by the way. So
this is very complex.
okay.
So the question is, how can we provide guidance to the markets in order to help them to adopt to climate change and adopt co-benefit measures, adaptation and mitigation? Next question. Do you want me to? Okay. Next one is, what are the most important renewable energy development obstacles today? And there are a series of questions regarding nuclear power as an alternative to reducing emissions. Is nuclear power an alternative?
So how would the energy sector will come in terms with climate change? Now, in the energy sector today, I see three different behavior. One part, they still don't believe that the climate change will have any effect on their business, one part. The second part believes that the climate change policies affect their businesses and they position themselves accordingly. The third part, and the largest part, they are hesitant. They are thinking, is it really something serious? We read a lot in the newspapers and these emails coming and the NGOs are organizing something. Is it something, a bit of a green issue which will come and go like a fashion, or it will be with us for several years and it will affect my business? And the third group is the largest group, to be very frank with you. I believe third group is looking at Paris extremely closely. If we get from Paris a signal, and this signal doesn't necessarily need to be a legally binding agreement for every country, every businesses and so on, but a signal that the political signal, this is coming, my friends, then businesses will adapt. We shouldn't worry about the businesses. They are very clever people. They know how to make money. When they smell that this is coming, they will adapt themselves. So we don't need to worry too much about the businesses, and I'm sure they will make their businesses perfectly, but that signals need to be provided. What are the obstacles for the renewables? For me, the biggest obstacle worldwide, I am talking, is the subsidies given to fossil fuels. In a big part of the world, coal, oil, and gas are heavily subsidized, their prices, and they are extremely cheap, very, very cheap. And if something is cheap, for example, coal, much cheaper than the market price because government gives the money, how come that the renewables, which are becoming slowly but surely cost-effective, can compete with them? They cannot. So therefore, subsidies on the fossil fuels, the competitor to renewable energy, is the biggest obstacle because you are helping artificially those fossil fuels. And the second one is something coming from the renewable energies nature. As I mentioned, they are unpredictable. It means if there is no wind, you don't have electricity. If there is no sun, suddenly disappear, you don't have electricity. So therefore, you have to build electricity systems that are providing security. Even though there is no wind, then the natural gas will come in the picture, and you don't have electricity cut problems, the grid issues, an area that IEA is the worldwide renowned expert, how to run the best electricity grids. So this is a second obstacle for the renewables. Nuclear power, I am sure I will make many colleagues now not happy, but I am a believer that a safe, sustainable use of nuclear power is one of the instruments that can bring the CO2 emissions down, because it generates electricity without interruption, base load electricity, and without any emissions output. But, as I said, nuclear has two problems. One, a safe, sustainable use is very important. This should be secured. Second, to build a nuclear power plant today requires a lot of cash on the table. They are very expensive. And without government support, just with the markets, it is very difficult to do so. There are some examples like we see in the UK now. There are good examples there, but generally viewed, it is a more government thing. Today, there are 73 nuclear power plants under construction, and almost half of them are in China alone, to show the role of government, how important it is. But I personally believe with the right investment, safety measures, nuclear can play a role addressing the climate change.
So another set of three questions. We still have some time to go, some 10 minutes or so. So what would you tell a businessman about the short-term implications of climate change? It is relatively clear on the long term, but not so on the short term. Next question is there a link between energy security and mitigating greenhouse gas emissions? Please explain. And the third one is, are oil prices incentivizing the belief of peak oil? When do we expect peak oil? Is this why the energy mix will change in favor of climate change? So a reflection around peak oil and prices.
Now, I am not a scientist, but many scientists say that we are already seeing the short-term implications of climate change. And the temperature is increasing. Apparently, 2014 was one of the hottest years in many decades we had behind us. And we have already seen a lot of heat waves in many countries, including Europe, with serious impact on the health of human beings. But businesses, to wake them up, short-term climate change implications are important. But what is more important, how to move the businesses, and I'm sure there are businessmen here, they should forgive me, they should understand that if they ignore climate change, they may lose money. I think this is the angle that they can be convinced rather than convincing the impact of climate change. Of course, it's very important to make them a very respected part of the community. We work on that, but we must also make them understand that they may lose money if they ignore climate change and its implications for their business strategies. Is there a link between energy security and greenhouse gas emissions? Very much so. For example, two of them, if you use wind energy, we talk about it, then wind energy is an energy that you produce at home. So you don't need to get gas or oil for any country from abroad, and you can really do it yourself, more and more domestic production. Second, the most important fuel today for me, not nuclear, not oil, not wind, most important fuel is the fuel which we cannot see, which is the efficiency. So the efficiency can also be a very good friend for fighting against climate change, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and improving the energy security. Peak oil. Now, if you look at the current oil markets, I think we are far from the peak oil. It means no oil is left. So this is for the colleagues who are not familiar with the issue. I think especially with the unconventional oil coming from United States, from Canada, but from other countries in Europe, in Latin America and elsewhere, I think we are far from the total peak oil. But what we see is the conventional oil is coming to a plateau. This is something different. But if you look at the conventional oil and unconventional oil, such as the shale oil, the oil sands, and the others, then we are far from the peak, and the current oil prices show that the markets do not think that peak oil is coming tomorrow or even the day after tomorrow.
Then probably some last question is, how are we certain that individual and voluntary state pledges will suffice to avert catastrophic climate change? Furthermore, how will a Paris Agreement be enforceable and effective in cases of underperformance by states?
I didn't understand the first part of the question.
Yes, how are we certain that individual and voluntary state pledges, the INDCs, will be sufficient to avert catastrophic climate change? And how will a Paris Agreement be enforceable and effective if, in cases of underperformance by these states in regards to their INDCs?
So, INDCs, or these pledges or the commitments of the countries, do not bring us to a 2 degrees target. It's for sure. But I would warn everybody to say that INDCs don't bring us to 2 degrees, so therefore forget them. It will be completely wrong for many reasons, political reasons and also for the real market reasons. Because what happens with the INDCs is that they are giving a very much needed signal to the energy sector, pushing the renewable energies. I am telling you that these INDCs, which are considered to be modest, not ambitious enough, end up in the next 15 years, 60% of all new power plants coming from renewable energies. Could we ever think about this? 60% of all new power plants are renewables. 40% gas plus coal plus oil plus nuclear put together, 40%, renewables 60%. So I wouldn't underestimate the INDCs. It's good for the start. We should know that they will create a momentum. And of course, we should push more, but it will be politically and also empirically very wrong to say that INDCs, forget them, they are not good enough. So what happens if the countries do not move along with their INDCs? There are measures to be taken internationally, one of them being, as I said, internationally telling everybody that this country is underperforming compared to what they have done INDCs. This is happening in the international politics all the time. Some countries in different areas of the social life, political life, underperforming, and they are pinpointed with the international community, and I am sure this will be also one of them. And there are very rare issues, international political issues, that there is such a big agreement that the climate change is a crucial subject for all of us. Therefore, identifying the so-called laggards will be much easier, and I am sure IEA will be the leading that group which are identifying the countries which are not doing enough.
Okay. Well, with that, I think we have to close our question and answers session. Before you leave, Dr. Birol, Dr. Hernandez would have some presents for you, I believe. But before that, let me just thank you for this very insightful and knowledgeable presentation. I am sure that today we have some answers to our questions, but we probably have more questions that come from your presentation. Thank you for your interest and your questions for Dr. Birol. I must say that you performed brilliantly. You were able to answer 50% of the questions that were asked, so you still have some
100% of all the questions you ask me, 50% of the questions, because
I know. So I underperformed. Sorry.
No. Any questions you have, anytime, send us an email. We will come back to you. Don't worry about it.
So thank you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So it's a pleasure. Really,